Hamas leader overnight that could have major repercussions for the war in Gaza. Ismail Haniyeh, a political leader who is one of the chief negotiators in the ceasefire talks, was killed in Iran just after attending the inauguration of the country's new leader. This comes on the heels of another major assassination of a top Hezbollah leader in Lebanon. Imtiaz Tayyib is in Beirut. Imtiaz, good morning.
Good morning. Well, it really does feel like the Middle East is on the brink of a major escalation following what appears to be 2 assassinations carried out by Israel in a matter of hours, including here in Beirut. Now, one of the men killed, Ismail Haniyeh, Hamas's political chief, has been a key negotiator for a ceasefire and hostage release deal with Israel. But any potential agreement is now in major jeopardy.
Chaos in the immediate aftermath of the Israeli airstrike in the southern Beirut neighborhood of Dahya. When we arrived shortly afterwards, hundreds had gathered after learning 4 people, including 2 children, were killed and at least 70 wounded in the attack.
Well, you might be able to see over my shoulder that building over there that was damaged in that Israeli strike. And as you can imagine, it's a scene of real chaos here, but also one of real anger.
In a move almost unheard of, the Israeli military claimed responsibility for the strike and named its target.
Fuad Shukur, also known as Said Muhsin, Hezbollah's most senior military commander and the head of its strategic unit.
Israel says Shukur was responsible for a rocket attack on a soccer field over the weekend that killed 12 young people in the Golan Heights. But before Hezbollah could even respond to his apparent killing, Iranian state TV announced another major assassination. Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas's political wing. While Iran blamed Israel for the killing, Israel has remained silent. But it's triggered panic in the Iranian capital, with the Revolutionary Guard ordering an immediate overhaul of the nation's internal security. The assassination has other major implications too. Haniyeh was leading ceasefire and hostage release negotiations for Hamas and was widely seen as more moderate and pragmatic than Hamas's military leaders who, after nearly 10 months of brutal warfare, continued to battle Israeli forces in Gaza. The fear now is those talks could be completely abandoned.
Yeah, that's the major issue here, is that there's obviously always going to be internal conflict within any organization. There's internal conflict within, the Knesset in Israel, right? And Yahya Sinwar is seen as a more, obviously he's the military faction leader. So Yahya Sinwar is seen as like a significantly less moderate figure in terms of the Palestinian resistance than Ismail Haniyeh is. After all, he's the one who's literally negotiating the fucking ceasefire deals. So assassinating the fucking moderate guy who's talking to you about the ceasefire negotiations is the most insane thing you can do if you want to do the ceasefire deal to begin with and release the hostages to begin with. But they don't want that. Israel has never wanted that, especially Benjamin Netanyahu does not want that. Okay? Are you sad Hamas leader is dead? Brick dumb chaser. I'm sad that the Israeli hostages are not returning home. I'm sad that the Palestinian hostages are not returning home. I'm sad that there is no ceasefire in sight. I'm sad that our brutal, violent, barbaric attack dog in the Middle East is completely unleashed and doing whatever the fuck they want to do and escalating tensions with the hopes that daddy, the United States of America, American soldiers, American military men and women will go and defend Israel when they do this kind of shit and get retaliation. Okay? If you don't comprehend this, if you cannot comprehend this, I don't know what to tell you. Now, the IDF didn't technically claim responsibility, even though they did. They did the same thing because they can't fucking help themselves. They're fascists, right? What do we know about fascists? Fascists can never help themselves. They have to fucking flex. So what did the IDF do? On their fucking Facebook account, they posted a photo immediately after the assassination of, they posted a photo of Ismail Haniyeh with the words, target eliminated. Then they deleted it. But of course, everybody fucking saw it. The actual military leader of Hamas Al-Qassam Brigades, Mohammed Daif, was already reportedly killed by the IDF a few weeks ago in Han Yunis. Anyway, for chatter still being dumb, Ismail Haniyeh held no military rank. He was not even weapons trained. He was the head of the diplomatic arm of the party. I'm sorry, more than two moving pieces confuses some, barks at noises, chatters, but y'all need to catch up or keep your tongues behind your teeth. U.S. officials already claimed it was Israel anyway. Of course, everybody fucking knows it's Israel. What are we talking about?
And this morning, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said all-out war in the region is...
Mohammed Daif, as far as I understand, is still not... is not confirmed.
Still not inevitable. But following Israel's attack in Beirut and the assassination in Tehran, that may be wishful thinking, as Hezbollah, Hamas, and now crucially Iran will no doubt respond.
Yeah, you are 100% going. USS Wasp with 2,500 Marines are deployed outside Lebanon right now. Is just starting. US will need to send 100K plus. Now, why the fuck are we in this suicide pact when the obvious when the obvious situation here is reining in the fucking attack dog by telling him no more weapons? That's it. Okay? That's all you need to do. Like, you just have to say, if you're America in this circumstance, all you have to do is say, hey, you don't want to do this fucking ceasefire that we presented, that we keep repping, that we keep actually fucking pointing to as a good deal, that people are finally asking, demanding in the Western world even. Okay, no more weapons. That's it. It ends tomorrow. It ends yesterday. Okay? It could have ended on October 8th if America wanted it to end on October 8th. Okay? That's the reality. Iran is going to send another volley of missiles to give America and Israel a 48-hour notice. Anything short of Israel assassinating the Ayatollah on live TV will not have consequences for the state of Israel in the short term. They have passed every single red line. I don't think Iran is interested in doing anything major that puts the existence of the state of Iran as it currently exists at risk. Yeah. Iran said that they will respond, that they will retaliate, but everything that they've done thus far, whether it was after Qasem Soleimani's assassination, which was also illegal and fucking insane, or whether it be after Israel bombed the consulate, it has always been incredibly restrained. Incredibly restrained. So restrained that even Western media has considered it to be restrained. Think about that. Okay? They have no business ever giving Iran any kind of fucking positive coverage whatsoever. Okay? Now, the other side of this story is that Israel only responds to violence, as in Israel only responds positively to violence, positively by their enemies, right? Like, Israel only backs down when they actually have, when they actually see some kind of significant harm to their population. They respond with extra violence when it's obviously an enemy that they consider to be a weak enemy that they can punish by fucking destroying every matter of civil life in the Gaza Strip, okay? But they backed away from further escalations when Iran sent in a fuck ton of drones, including showcasing that they are capable of striking inside of Israel, military bases and whatnot, okay? Hezbollah did a similar move when they showed drone footage. Okay? Israel also had to back away from their invasion of Lebanon when Hezbollah pushed them out. This is a terrifying lesson to teach the entire resistance group in the region. Okay? Like, you're basically telling everybody, we'll fucking murder your children if we find you to be a weak foe. But if you actually show us that there will be consequences for our actions, then we'll back away. That's what they're teaching everybody. They're like, no diplomacy with us. We're rabid. You cannot negotiate with us. We will do everything in our power to keep fucking killing you, especially if we perceive you to be weak. And now they've destroyed the fucking ceasefire talks entirely. Here is what Secretary of State Anthony Blinken had to say about the Haniyeh operation that Israel conducted. I think we should look at Lebanon as a far more serious situation. Hezbollah may now use its precision missiles on Israel after its top military leader was assassinated in broad daylight in the middle of Beirut. And Beirut was always the red line for Hezbollah. Civilians were also killed in the strike. The real possibility of war is with Lebanon, in my opinion. I mean, yeah, I think that is a very real consideration. But also, Iran's retaliation now. Iran says that they might retaliate, or they've okayed a retaliation. So obviously, that's three fronts all of a sudden. You have Gaza, you have Hezbollah in the north, and you have Iran everywhere. You then also have the Yemen retaliation that is very much real as well. Yemen literally bombed a fucking Israeli neighborhood with a fucking drone, with like a bathtub drone. That was insane. That's like previously unheard of shit. Okay? Where the fuck is your air defenses?
Haniyeh was involved in ceasefire talks in Gaza. What impact is his death going to have?
Well, of course, I've seen the reports, and what I can tell you is this. First, this is something we were not aware of or involved.
Great, man. Thank you. Once again, reiterating that, like, I was asleep on the wheel. Israel is dog walking us. They do whatever the fuck they want. Like, even if it's not true, right? Even if it's literally not true, because fucking Benjamin Netanyahu was in America like last week. What are we talking about, right? Like, they had no conversations about what the next steps are. Okay. They didn't even fucking bring up the top of the hour ad break coming at the top of the hour when there's a 3-minute ad break. If you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe. They didn't bring that up. For $5, $6 or free with a Twitch Prime by connecting your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, you get one free subscription a month that you can use on whichever broadcaster you choose to use it on. Here's the 3-minute ad break now. I know I'm vile. So even if it is not true, and they were absolutely aware of this, which I think they must have some inclination that it was going to happen. Okay. Why the fuck are you saying that Israel gets to do whatever the fuck it wants? You're just showing weakness again. The New York Times report says that the plan being considered by Iran may be to do another combined attack on Israel with allies in Iraq, Syria, and Yemen using missiles and drones, but this time targeting military sites in Tel Aviv and Haifa. Last time it was military bases in the desert. Yeah, it was in Negev that they hit. However, Hezbollah didn't participate in the large attack in April. This time they may do so. Germany just asked citizens to leave Lebanon while it's still possible. I think England said similar things as well. A lot of the Western nations are trying to fucking evacuate their citizens out of Lebanon as quickly as possible because the region is now gearing up for fucking war. Great stuff overall. Anyone at this point that still tries to maintain the position that like Israel is always looking for a partner in peace but can't find it is the most delusional person on the planet. Now, do I Do I fault them for being this delusional? No, because every aspect of the media is covering it as though it's Hamas that's like fucking up the bag, fucking up the deal over and over again. Okay? But it has always been Israel, and it will continue to be Israel. And if you can't see it, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you're in the midst of a hostage negotiation. America wants you to do the hostage negotiation. The entirety of the Western world wants you to do the hostage negotiation. International organs of justice have declared you to be a fucking war criminal, your leadership. The International Criminal Justice Court has declared Israel to be an apartheid. Everyone is basically saying exactly what's going on, and Americans are just going, la, 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 can't hear you, can't hear you. They had a fucking pro-rape protest like this 2 days ago. That's what Israel's worried about. How much rape can their fucking soldiers do on Palestinians that they've detained? That's their top priority right now. The fact that we are going in 10 toes down on this like genocidal apartheid regime in this like weird suicide pact is insane.
In. It's very hard to speculate, and I've learned over many years never to speculate on the impact one event may have on something else. So I can't tell you what this means.
Haniyeh.
That sounds fake. Yeah, of course it sounds fake because it's like unimaginably cruel. It's insanely cruel. It sounds utterly psychotic. Except if you watch my last video on it, Israel just had its own January 6th moment. Let's get to this. You will see where I talked about it. Okay? This 60-minute video will go through all of the details of why the Knesset held an emergency meeting where Benjamin Netanyahu's own Likud party Knesset member actively said, yes, shoving a metal rod in the ass of a detained Palestinian in the Sdei Teiman facility, which was covered for months at this point by even Western media for having like horrific acts of rape be conducted, a concentration camp that is not actually for Hamas militants, but simply people suspected of being Hamas militants, a concentration camp where they release 40% of the detained Palestinians in a matter of weeks after raping and torturing them, by the way. That concentration camp had 9 of the jailers get arrested by the Israeli government. What did the Israeli public do? They went to the fucking prison and the military courts and tried to personally release the fucking 9 detained soldiers. Now, why did Israel try to actually do some justice here in this one specific instance? It's because they are under investigation by international organs of justice, and they want to avoid getting penalized for it and actually getting punished for it. They want to use complementarity as they want to use the principle of complementarity, the idea that there's due process inside of Israel for war crimes, therefore no international organ of justice can interfere in their affairs, as a mechanism, as a shield. That's why they wanted to fucking do it. That's why they arrested the 9 people. They detained them. Okay? They were released some of them were released, by the way. Iranian media reporting that an Iranian military advisor was killed in Beirut also. Milad Bedi, one of Iran's military advisors in Lebanon, was martyred in last night's attack by Zionist regime fighters in Tahrir. He was settled in the vicinity of Hajj Mohsen Shakar building, and his body was identified a few hours ago. Okay? Something that you have to remember, something that you have to consider is that the people that were protesting were not protesting because of the rapes that were occurring in the Sdei Teiman concentration camp. They were protesting because they were pro-rape. Okay? That's who we have a suicide pact with. That's the country that we have a suicide pact with right now. That's the country that we're letting ride. That's the country that we're riding in the battle for. Absolutely unimaginable. So fucking insane. Anyway, here's Trita Parsi of the Quincy Institute. shedding some light on the actions that Israel took earlier on CNN this morning.
Vice President of the Quincy Institute, an American think tank specializing in U.S. foreign policy. His analysis on exactly how seismic the events of the last 24 hours are for the U.S. role in this region, giving 4 specific points. In his words, 1, it kills the ceasefire talks. 2, it may kill renewed U.S.-Iran diplomacy.
Yeah, this was a older post from Vincent Bevins. In the final years of the South African apartheid, the white government decided it must, 1, overthrow the government of Angola, 2, install a puppet regime in Namibia, 3, attack Zimbabwe, 4, attack Botswana, 5, attack Zambia in order to survive. This did not work. Okay? They are going through the exact steps that every fucking prior white supremacist fascist government has gone through. It is a damn near identical circumstance to Nazi Germany. It is a damn near identical circumstance to apartheid South Africa. Okay? And Israel has been given a wonderful exit ramp from the resilient Palestinian people to have a South African apartheid ending, which it refuses to do so. And it seems like it will have a Nazi Germany ending instead. Okay? The only difference in this dynamic is that America is unconditionally riding with Israel. Haniyeh has been through many attempts on his life, most notably the failed 2003 bombing of the Hamas leadership conclave in the Ramal. But what's the value in this? They did it with Salah Shahadeh, Ahmed Yassin, Al-Rantisi, all unbelievably important figures, all replaced. Every round in Gaza, there's an article that reads with the euphoria, these are the names of the Hamas officials the IDF killed. And people forget because God forbid we acknowledge there's something systemic here. Exactly. Do you think that the Palestinian people are going to all of a sudden turn around and be like, oh, you assassinated the guy that was conducting the ceasefire negotiation? Oh, well, I guess I no longer feel some type of way about you murdering my entire family, you destroying all the water wells, you doing a military operation, you're doing genocide to my people. I guess that's okay now. No, he's just going to be replaced. Of course. Because this is not a political strategy, okay? This is a group of individuals that have only known violence their entire lives by this criminal Zionist entity that have no other way out. It's a push comes to shove situation. Anyway.
3, it may get Prime Minister Netanyahu the war that he has been looking for. 4, it corners Kamala Harris. I'm going to bring you back in shortly, Alex, because I know that you'll want to make some comments on these. Trita, thank you for joining me and Alex this hour. Just explain a little further where you believe and what you mean by this analysis in terms of Netanyahu and his political calculations at this point.
Thank you for having me. Well, I think, first of all, we have to recognize that Netanyahu in particular has been pushing for a war between the United States and Iran for more than 15 years. He's done so using the nuclear program. On a couple of occasions, he was actually quite close. The strategy has been to start the war himself and then drag the U.S. into it. This may have been one of his best chances yet to do so. So it is completely in line with everything else that he's done for the last 15 or so years. Moreover, we know very well that Netanyahu has been the main obstacle for a ceasefire deal. In the Israeli media, it's openly discussed how he actually has been leaking intelligence in order to sabotage the talks. He's being accused by the family members of the hostages, by his own officials, by military officials of being the obstacle. And he's done so for a very simple reason. The minute this war ends, his political career ends and his prison sentence likely will begin, given the corruption charges against him. So prolonging the war has always been a case. Undermining the ceasefire negotiations has been the case. And what is more effective in killing the ceasefire talks than actually killing the person on the other side of the negotiating table? And then you have the Kamala Harris aspect of this. Kamala Harris's body language, her tone, the rhetoric clearly indicated that there will be some form of a shift. How substantive it will be, we don't know, but some form of a shift away from what Biden's approach to Netanyahu, which has been quite differential. But by escalating matters in this way that he has now done, potentially even getting a regional war, he will essentially force Kamala Harris into the same bear hug as Biden voluntarily adopted after October 7th, and will take the initiative away from Kamala Harris in case she becomes president, rather than and forcing her to react to events rather than actually being able to take initiatives of her own.
Alex, you were in Washington.
Dude, I'm telling you right now, this is really fucking bad. Okay, this will, if there is an escalation and the United States is brought in to a regional conflict in a much more meaningful capacity in terms of like American soldiers, okay? That's precisely what Benjamin Netanyahu wants. Giving him what he wants is not only devastating for the globe, devastating for oil prices in general, devastating for the global economy in general, but it's over at that point. It's fucking game over. Like, there was, from a domestic politics standpoint, okay, from a simple American election cycle standpoint, this right here, from just simply the conversation, if we're going to look at it in the narrowest way possible, looking at it as like Biden versus Donald Trump, I mean, Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. If this leads to the Biden administration going to war on behalf of Israel, it's the most Jover it has ever been for Kamala Harris. Okay? It's the most Jover for not only just like Israel, it's the most Jover for America. It's just miserable.
It seems like ages ago that Netanyahu was there. It's not. It's what, 72, 90 hours ago. It was always going to be a controversial visit. What did he...
Another two points that I've reiterated this election cycle from the start is, one, this is the most boring election cycle so far, but it has the capacity to become the most interesting one. We're already there. It has become the most interesting election cycle so far. The other thing that I keep reiterating is an age-old adage from American elections in general. Foreign policy is never the top of mind until it becomes the only thing that people think about. Okay? Foreign policy is never top of mind for Americans until it is the only thing for Americans. Okay? Vietnam is an example of this. Israel could make this the exact equation.
He achieve? And what did he leave with, if anything?
Well, I think he achieved things mainly on the domestic front. He managed to come over here and show his domestic audience back home that he has the support of the United States, not just from Republicans, many of whom were on their feet clapping, giving standing ovations, alongside a number of Democrats, we should say, when he gave his speech to Congress last Wednesday. He had these meetings at the White House. He showed that he is very much welcomed in Washington. So it was mainly sort of for domestic benefit was the sense. But I would say that he left on less good terms because following his meeting with Kamala Harris, she came out and gave arguably the most forceful speech that we've heard about Gaza from the Biden administration. Yes, talking about the U.S.'s ironclad support for Israel, but then talking in very emotive terms about the suffering that we're seeing in Gaza. And she said, "I will not be silent." A couple hours later, we heard from an anonymous Israeli.
Haniyeh was a terrorist. We should be happy he's gone. If Putin got killed, nobody would be sad. Dude, what are you talking about? Haniyeh is not the equivalent of Putin in this situation. He's not even the equivalent to Zelensky in this situation. He's the guy who's negotiating the ceasefire. What the fuck are you talking about? Oh. Putin is comparable to Netanyahu in this equation, no matter how hard liberals and Republicans try not to see that reality. The equivalence here is Putin being Netanyahu, not Ismail Haniyeh.
Israeli official who talked about how those comments were problematic and could cause problems for the ceasefire deal. So he left under less positive terms than he arrived in. I will just note one more thing, Becky. We've heard for weeks, you and I have talked endlessly about the ceasefire deal and U.S. officials putting the onus on Hamas, saying the ball is in Hamas's court. They have stopped saying that. In fact, it appears that the ball has switched into Israel's court.
It was always in Israel's court. It's just media always likes to play fucking catch up. The media loves playing catch up every day. Like months later, they're like, oh, well, I guess this Sderot Haman concentration camp is kind of fucked up. 6 months after the original investigative reporting that comes from Israeli investigative reporters. For the past 3 months, we've said that Hamas is actually ruining the fucking peace deals. But and the ceasefire, but maybe it was actually Israel. The ball's on Israel's court. And it's like, yeah, if you're deluded and if you're just like abiding by the State Department line, then yeah, if you're reiterating what Anthony Blinken is saying all the time, then yeah, you're just lying to your fucking audience. You're shocked about this change of attitude.
U.S. officials did expect Netanyahu to move forward on that ceasefire deal last week. And I'm just struck by this image that the Mossad director, David Barnea, was at the table on Sunday negotiating for this ceasefire with CIA Director Bill Burns and others, while also, if this is indeed true, potentially planning the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh. Becky?
No, that's a power.
How the fuck do you negotiate with a terrorist? Talk about how the IDF bombed the hospital again. Oh, October 7 leavers coming back. Coming back. October 7 leavers coming back, dude. Look, last time he was in here, let me pop in and hear the absolute quote from Hasan. Kamala is as garbage as Biden. The copium is fucking crazy. Hasan is the king of copium. On June 27th. Perhaps that should have actually given you your first inclination that I know what the fuck I'm talking about in terms of American domestic policy and foreign policy, and you don't. But no, okay? No. He just still operating. He is still operating on this fucking weirdo attitude. You literally know nothing, you dumbass. Well, I know how to spell no, which I guess you don't. If at this point you still are running with this narrative that like IDF doesn't bomb hospitals, you are living on a different planet. Okay? It's not even a position that like the American government is pushing. Like there's no one. Israel is not even pushing that position. They're like celebrating how hard they fucking siege hospitals. But thank you. I think any country would have a hard time negotiating with a group that cries for the death of all Jews. Yeah, you're right, man. That's definitely what's going on in your little hug box that you've cultivated this attitude in. Let me explain something to you, okay? I would show a little bit more, I would be a little bit more humble if I got owned this fucking hard for repeating my favorite political commentators' talking points in another political commentators' chat without ever like re-examining them at all. If I was this far off base and the community that I was coming into, that I'm chirping at, was so on the money, I would probably have a little bit of re-examination. This should be your wake-up call, right? But instead, you're still operating on this fucking weird boundary. You're still operating on this idea that like Yeah, no, Hamas are actually like Jew haters and whatnot, and it's not a resistance to an apartheid regime that the entire fucking world sees. Okay? I don't know how you refuse to acknowledge that. This guy gave you money for 18 months just to cry? Yeah, a lot of this happens quite frequently. People's brains break over like one issue, and then they just become like ride or die haters. They look for an alternative viewpoint that like that basically brings them in. An alternative viewpoint that brings them back, or an alternative viewpoint that basically confirms their biases. So then they just like get really invested in another person. I'm urging you, to be fair, I think it's all bad. No, don't fucking do this like cowardly. Well, I guess both sides are bad shit, okay? No, you're just like trying to retriangulate your position here in this circumstance because like, obviously, you came in here with the fucking smoke. You were like, talk about how the IDF bombed the hospital again, thinking that that was going to be a good line when Israel has blown up every fucking hospital in Gaza. What the fuck are we talking about? Okay? You have to recognize at a certain point that like you're on the wrong side of every single fucking issue. And that's probably not your own fault. It's because you just keep fucking reiterating and regurgitating talking points that you got from someone else without actually thinking about it on your own, without seeking within yourself what you truly believe. Does this actually correspond to my moral compass? Okay? It's just weird to do it when you're so obviously in the wrong. You see what I'm saying? They're on the last talking point for the streamer who has suddenly stopped talking about Israel-Palestine issue now that the rape torture facilities have been exposed. Yeah. Like Israel 2 days ago was having a pro-rape protest. They had a January 6th for pro-rape. And you're over here being like, oh, actually, these guys are still operating on death to all Jews. Like, no, that's not the reason, man. The fuck are we talking about? There were a lot of people who were not aware of how Israel operates in general on October 8th. They were shocked with the unimaginable amount of violence they saw from October 7th. Okay? They could not comprehend it. They were like, this is insane. This is an insane amount of violence that the Israeli civilians were subjected to. And then the next 10 months, people... The fuck? And then the next 10 months, people started, understanding. No, there is just fucking weird ass noises I'm hearing. In the next 10 months, people started coming to terms with maybe why the Palestinian population was resisting so aggressively towards Israel. And it wasn't necessarily anti-Semitism or Jew hatred or whatever the fuck people think it is, no matter how hard Israel tries to maintain that position. Anyway, I'm not asking you to immediately recognize they're in the wrong here. I'm simply asking that you just, you could just reconsider on your own. You don't have to do it publicly or whatever. Just seek within yourself. 40,000 Palestinians have been murdered over the course of the past 10 months with American rockets that Israel is dumping on the entirety of the Gaza Strip. The majority of those murdered are women and children and the elderly. The overwhelming majority, 2/3. Okay? 2/3. Don't you think that is unimaginably radicalizing for people? There is no, what is the Palestinian people supposed to do? The so-called peace process is almost identical to this supposed ceasefire negotiation that the media keeps telling us Hamas is fucking up. Think about that. The historical so-called peace process, it played out in identical ways in which this current peace process, this current ceasefire negotiations is occurring. That's why people are so wrong about the way that the way that this was like. That's why people are so wrong when they talk about how Israel could never find a partner in peace. That narrative is just complete and utter nonsense. And so many people can see that that narrative was complete and utter nonsense by just simply looking at this round of the peace talks and the ceasefire negotiations, especially in the midst of Israel assassinating the guy who was doing the fucking ceasefire.
Powerful image to keep in mind. Trita, let's just, for the benefit of our viewers, hear from the U.S. Defense Secretary in the past few hours. Have a listen.
I don't think war is inevitable. I maintain that. I think there's always room and opportunities for diplomacy, and I'd like to see parties pursue those opportunities. If Israel is attacked, we certainly will help defend Israel.
Well, of course, there is a war in Gaza. What he's clearly referring to there is is answering a question about whether he believes there will be a regional escalation here off the back of what we've seen over the last, 25 hours or so, the assassination of two of Israel's key enemies. I mean, the US clearly still stands behind Israel, and you heard that from the defense minister. Perhaps we are, as Alex suggests, seeing a pivot of atmosphere here. But whether or not this administration in Washington is changing its position, should they not come out?
No offense, but assassinating terrorists in Iran is fucking hilarious, and you can't convince me it's not. This is, again, just like trying to be edgy and nihilistic and being like, dude, no, I'm just laughing at the situation. Yeah, dude, when your fucking cousin is drafted, when your cousin is sitting on top of a fucking carrier and gets hit with a Yemen rocket, okay, and is blown in the fucking bits, I don't think you'll be laughing about that situation at all. Or if he's lucky and he actually does get deployed to Lebanon to defend Israel, by the way, and then comes back fucked up with his dick blown out, ruined for the rest of his fucking life, desperate for medical attention that the American government will not give him, you won't be fucking laughing about that. You won't be laughing. You won't be edgy and cool and nihilistic about that reality, okay? Stop behaving like fucking animals. Not even animals. Animals have at least an interest in like self-preservation, right? It's a primal instinct. This is what I'm talking about. Like, people do not comprehend what these actions, what kind of consequences these actions will have. I hate this notion that people only think about the worst aspects of it when it comes home to them. It's a very Republican principle. Oh, I'm homophobic until my son comes out as gay. Oh, I'm anti-LGBT until my daughter is a lesbian, like fucking Dick Cheney. You know what I mean? It's just like so unimaginably selfish. Yeah. You think the inflation crisis is bad right now? Wait until fucking Saudi oil refineries are blown up. Be desperate for that sweet Venezuelan oil now, if that happens.
With more specific parameters, with things as tense as they are now?
They certainly should, because I think, Secretary Austin is absolutely correct. War is not inevitable. There's still opportunities to prevent it, but those opportunities can only be actualized if the United States actually does something about it. And unfortunately, what we're not seeing is the type of parameters or red lines that are necessary in order to make sure that the Israelis do not escalate matters in this way. But now they have, and they've done it in the most audacious.
Israel has learned all of the worst lessons, that they can violate every red line with the Biden administration and not see any punishments, not see any consequences whatsoever. Why would they do anything different? Benjamin Netanyahu selfishly wants the war to continue so he doesn't go to jail after the war is over. And he is going to do everything in his power to stay in office, to avoid legal scrutiny. Okay? And yes, that does include opening up another front in the war, maybe even two fronts in the war, specifically so that he can bring the United States into the fucking fold. That's it.
Audacious way aimed at maximum embarrassment of Iran, which means that it also maximizes the likelihood that unfortunately Iranian will respond and by that trigger an escalatory spiral. The United States does not want to see a regional war and doesn't want to get dragged into that war. But what Netanyahu has done here is exactly that. He has triggered what would likely lead to an escalation that very well could drag the United States into the war. If the US doesn't want this, then it needs to do something about it instead of just publicly expressing support for Israel's right to defend itself while completely neglecting the United States' own interest to stay out of these type of wars.
I just want to look at this through the lens of the US and Iran and its on-off diplomacy, as it were. We have today a new Iranian president who was deemed to be, at least in principle, a better interlocutor, be that directly or indirectly with the US at this point, and at this point it is indirectly, with regard any sort of future talks. Where does this all leave that? You're an expert in this. You closely watch the US-Iranian relationship, which is, of course, extremely tenuous. Where is it today, July the 31st?
Well, it is in a much worse situation than it was yesterday. There was a small opportunity. Pezeshkian ran on a platform of seeking renewed diplomacy with the United States, regardless of whether there would be Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, or even Donald Trump in the White House. But this would obviously still be a very tough battle, both internally in the United States and internally in Iran. But that battle, the battle of actually being able to create the political space and the political will for sustained diplomacy that actually can lead to success, has now become all the more difficult, if not impossible, in the short and the medium term because of this assassination.
Alex, Trita, very much appreciate it. Your time invaluable for us.
Oh, there can be no ambiguity about this, says Sheamus. Israel wants total war. It wants to drag America into an NSIG that will secure its existence forever. It does not want de-escalation. It does not want peace. It wants the initiation of murder-suicide pact built in the U.S. alliance. Anyway. And now, Iran's leader orders attack on Israel for Haniyeh killing, officials say. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, ordered retaliation after a humiliating security failure as Iran once again balances showing strength against the risk of escalation. Mr. Khamenei gave the order at an emergency meeting of Iran's Supreme National Security Council on Wednesday morning, shortly after Iran announced that Mr. Haniyeh had been killed, said the three Iranian officials, including two members of the Revolutionary Guards. They asked their names not to be published because they were not authorized to speak publicly. Iran and Hamas have accused Israel of the assassination. Israel, which is at war with Hamas on the Gaza Strip, has neither acknowledged nor denied killing Mr. Haniyeh, who was in Tehran for the inauguration of Iran's new president. Israel has a long history of killing enemies abroad, including Iranian nuclear scientists and military commanders. Support for Israel in the West isn't as strong as they want us to believe it is. The actions are irrational and stink of desperation. Israel won't have U.S. backing unless it's in direct existential danger, which Netanyahu's trying to manufacture. Yeah, no, I agree. But the reality is, especially in terms of foreign policy, the American government rarely ever listens to the wishes of the population. Do you know what I mean? It's not like Americans broadly are like, oh yeah, no, I love fucking waging war all around the planet. If that was the case, then people that are running for president, like Donald Trump even, would not consistently try to present themselves, falsely, but still present themselves as peaceful doves. Okay? Through almost 10 months of war in Gaza, Iran has tried to strike a balance, putting pressure on Israel with sharply increased attacks by its allies and proxy forces in the region, while avoiding an all-out war between the two nations. In April, Iran made its biggest and most overt attack in Israel in decades of hostility. But yeah, this is terrifying stuff.
In the Middle East, where two separate attacks in the space of just 12 hours on the senior leaders of two Iran-backed groups have raised fears of a wider regional conflict. Hamas says its political leader, Ismail Haniyeh, was killed during a visit to Tehran. Early indications suggest that he and his bodyguard died when a rocket hit the house where he was staying. Hamas has accused Israel of being responsible and described the killing as a grave escalation. Well, hours earlier, Israel said it had killed a senior Hezbollah figure in a strike in Beirut. The movement has confirmed that Fawad Shukra, one of its top military commanders, was in a building targeted by Israel, but hasn't confirmed his fate. Israel said he was responsible for an attack that killed 12 young people in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. Well, let's start this hour with this report from Yolanda.
State media in Iran reporting the assassination in its capital of this top Hamas leader. A VIP guest, Ismail Haniyeh had been in Tehran along with the heads of other regional armed groups backed by Iran for the inauguration of the country's new president. But these were to be his last ever public appearances. In Gaza today, news of the killing worried many Palestinians about the implications for ending nearly 10 months of war with Israel.
If the leaders die, the political leaders, where are we going? Children are dying, the elderly are dying, the youth are dying. No one is looking out for us.
I hope this will be the last assassination, and God willing, the war will end after this assassination. We are all tired.
Ismail Haniyeh was from Gaza, but had recently lived in Qatar. He was seen as more pragmatic than hardline Hamas leaders still in the Palestinian territory, and had been overseeing talks on a ceasefire and the release of Israeli hostages. Now hostage families fear a setback.
I don't know how this news affects the deal, but I really wish for all of the forces around the world that will gather in order to bring our people back home. I hope our politicians will know to make this news into the release of the hostages.
Just hours before the Tehran attack, Israel had targeted a senior Hezbollah commander in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. It said he was responsible for a deadly rocket strike in the occupied Golan Heights last weekend. Fears were already running high about the possibility of retaliation and a wider war. Now, with Iran announcing 3 days of mourning for Ismail Haniyeh and vowing a harsh and painful response, the Middle East is even more on edge. Yolanda Nell, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Well, our correspondent.
What's sad is that less people care about the news in the Middle East, but now that the weird election is going on, I disagree. That's why I said, depending on what the retaliation looks like, depending on what the Iranian and the resistance group's retaliation looks like to this action, okay, whether or not America fucking has to send troops into the region, which they're already fucking moving in a way where they like are assuming a defensive posture for Israel, it can be a complete it can be a complete change in the narrative. Gray names have only one speed today. Yeah, me when cousin blows up brown kids in Mena. Me when cousin turns into a 22 a day statistic. Not understanding that blowing up brown kids in the Middle Eastern and North African region is the quickest way for that to happen. But people can't fucking connect the dots. Just like people can't connect the dots between every dollar being spent on the American military industrial complex is a dollar being taken away from fixing your fucking roads, fixing your goddamn healthcare, fixing your education. They just don't think about it like that at all. They only have one thing, and that is American military might. Okay? We're a mighty American military. What the fuck? Other people are going to find out why we don't have health care today. Okay? They going to find out. They going to learn today why we don't have health care. It's like, bro, why are you posting your fucking L's? Why are you posting your goddamn L's, dude? It's crazy.
Barbara Plett-Usher is in Jerusalem. Now, Israel never comments on these types of assassinations, and I asked her whether this time was any different.
Not so far, no. And again, in the most recent briefing with the Prime Minister's office, the spokesperson was asked, and he said we're not commenting on this incident. But we do know that after the October 7th attacks, which were led by Hamas, the Israeli government had said that they were going to target all of the Hamas leadership, including the political leadership. So they have kept that threat current throughout the past 10 months. And there was a strike against a political leader, the deputy political leader in Beirut in January. So I think the entire region and probably most other people do believe it was the Israelis who carried it out. There was a brief moment on social media when a picture of Ismail Haniyeh was posted by the government press office here with a graphic saying on his graphic across his face saying eliminated, but that was taken down very quickly. So clearly the Israelis don't want to own this.
Yeah, they immediately were like, oops, never mind, we fucked up again. But they're so horny. It's the same principle because they're fucking hogs, okay? They're Nazis, they're reactionary, they're fascists. And what do we know about hogs in America? What do we know about Nazis in America? They can never help themselves. They have to reveal that they're fucking Nazis, okay? They can never just shut the fuck up and just stick to the dog whistles. They immediately leak it. They immediately turn around and they just openly admit that they are. They can't stop themselves. Israel's the same fucking way. They can't stop themselves.
Publicly, but as I said, they had been saying that they would be targeting the leadership. The question really is now why they would take this particular opportunity, especially when Mr. Haniyeh had been very heavily involved in ceasefire talks that many were hoping would result in at least a pause in the conflict in Gaza.
Yes, there is that obvious question about why now and the implications on exactly what you've just mentioned. But is anything being reported about how exactly this attack was done?
Yeah, we don't know exactly how it was done. We do know that it took place at 2 o'clock in the morning, according to Iranian media, and also that it was very precise because there were other Hamas leaders in the building, as well as a leader of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and they were not hit. It was very much aimed, it seems, at Ismail Haniyeh, which means that the Israelis had very good intelligence about where he was. Perhaps because he was attending an event that had been pre-organized, the inauguration of the Iranian president, so maybe they had time to get intelligence on it. The Iranian media initially reported that it was a missile fired from outside the country, but there have been other reports saying that it was a rocket fired from a nearby building, which would implicate, which suggests there was some inside help for the attack. But we don't have any confirmation of exactly how it was carried out.
That was Barbara Plett-Usher. Let's speak live now to General Amir Avivi, who's the founder of the Israel Defence and Security Forum. General, welcome here to the programme. What is Israel's strategy here?
Lady from Tel Aviv, Israeli general. Well, it seems like they've covered the broad swath of all parties involved in the matter. Yeah. Up next, our guest, Benjamin Netanyahu. He is going to contextualize why all of these actions were an absolute necessity and for the betterment of society, as a matter of fact.
Well, Israel's strategy, I think, from day one is very, very clear. There is a clear goal of war to eradicate Hamas as a military entity and governmental entity. Hamas has attacked, unprovoked, killed 1,200 Israelis, raped women, decapitated head of children, took hostages.
Yeah, I can't listen to this fucking dumb. I can't listen to this dumb fuck, dude. Yeah, unprovoking. There is no apartheid. Please, no politique. No politique. No Israel. Don't say anything bad about Israel. No politique, no politique. Only football, only football. Terrorists, they are terrorists. Remember October 7, October 7. No politique, no politique. Good one, man. Thank you.
Two back-to-back developments that could push a region already on edge closer to the brink. First, the assassination of the political leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh. We're hearing reaction and condemnation from countries across the Middle East and indeed the world. Hamas says he was killed in Tehran on Tuesday after meeting with Iran's newly elected president, which you see here, and attending his inauguration. Iran state media say an airborne guided projectile was used to hit the building where Haniyeh was staying in the Iranian capital. Hamas was quick to blame Israel, calling it a Zionist strike. Israel says it doesn't...
Yeah, I wonder why, dude. Yeah, it's so crazy that Hamas was quick to blame Israel. Damn.
...respond to reports in the foreign media. Haniyeh has been part of Hamas for decades and was a key figure in the stalled ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas. Former Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif, posting on X, says Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is pushing the region and the world to the brink of catastrophe. Sinez, Nick Walsh, Tamana Cratchit, both here with me now. Nick, first of all, just explain what a key figure Haniyeh was and what we know about the attack.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is one of the leading, moderate, most recognisable faces of Hamas and somebody essentially deeply involved in all the negotiations that have been happening for months. That the US have invested so much political capital on the global stage and diplomatically over as well. What we know about this attack is pretty limited at this stage. We know an explosion occurred at about 2 o'clock in the morning in northern Tehran. It appears to be that only Haniyeh and his bodyguards were killed by this blast. That would suggest something that was pretty precise, pretty targeted, maybe quite limited. And the phrasing being used by Iranian state media here is a guided air...
I'm tripping that they aren't saying this is all Hamas' fault, Lamont. Bro, remember what I told you guys about how mainstream media has obviously two goals here. It's always to repackage State Department propaganda in a way that is appealing to the broadest audience, right? That's number one. But in order to do that, you also have to maintain an air of legitimacy and impartiality. If you drop the ball on impartiality and less people believe you and less people think you are legitimate, and right now there is a crisis in the United States of America, maybe even in the entire planet, with respect to the internet, with respect to so many like independent journalists coming out, so many independent outlets existing, where mainstream media has a very hard time looking like they are a legitimate source of news that you can rely on, okay? And if people don't rely on them as a legitimate source of news, then they can't do the fucking primary job, the primary responsibility of like basically fucking reiterating State Department positions in a way that is impartial and that is objective. So for that reason, they have to retriangulate when certain things are very obvious, right? What is very obvious over the course of the last 10 months is that Israel is conducting an unimaginably violent affair in Gaza, okay? Even if you don't think it's a genocide, which of course it is, but even if you don't think it's a genocide, and many of your parents might not think it's a genocide, but they still see 40,000 dead Palestinians. They see all of the fucking death and destruction that Israel has brought forward, and they go, yeah, that's pretty messed up, actually. That's undeniable. So the mainstream media has to change course and kind of cover that with a little bit more honesty, because if they don't do that, then everyone's going to go, what the fuck are you doing? Like, I can see what's happening. I see it on TikTok. I see it on Twitter. I see it on every other outlet. Like, I know what's going on. I've seen it, even on accident, right? So for that reason, they have to change their trajectory. They have to change course. They have to change the dynamics a little bit. And when Israel is the one that is fucking up the peace process, fucking up the ceasefire negotiations consistently, and the American government keeps reiterating the position that it's actually not Israel, but it's actually Hamas that's fucking up the peace process, that's one thing, right? And they did that. They did that since Biden launched the ceasefire three-phase proposal. said it was the Israeli proposal, even though Israel kept saying, no, it's not. Actually, we hate this thing. We're not going to do it. And kept violating Biden's red lines. They could continue just reiterating that position over and over again. But when Israel fucking decapitates the leadership that is responsible, that is more moderate and responsible for the ceasefire negotiation on the Palestinian side, it becomes an unavoidable reality. So they have to be honest about it. Because if they're not honest about it, if they still try to run cover, if they still try to make it seem like, no, it's actually Hamas. It's actually Hamas. Even in this situation, even in this moment, then everyone's going to go, dude, what the fuck? I'm done. I'm never trusting mainstream media ever again. That's the reason why there is a noted shift in the coverage of Israel's actions in mainstream media. And I observed this shift since 2021. It's dramatically changed since 2021 after a lot of the American NGOs, many of which I'm super critical of, openly declared Israel to be an apartheid regime. Okay? Just making every member of Hamas come forward and surrender, willingly nuke them. Yeah, no, that definitely will make everyone else forget how they've been orphaned by Israel. Hamas is not simply just an armed wing or an armed militant group, okay? You kill every Hamas person, there's Hamas too. Hamas itself is a evolving resistance faction that evolved into the violent and even in certain instances Islamist fundamentalist faction as a direct consequence of Israel's 76-year occupation, its apartheid, and its maintenance of the apartheid, which is incredibly violent. Do you understand? It's an army of orphans. That is precisely the reason why you cannot try to deal with this in violent ways unless you kill them all, which is seemingly what Israel's trying to do, or at least mass displacement.
Airborne projectile, which frankly could be anything. That might suggest it's less likely to be an Israeli jet firing a missile, but we still have so many holes in explaining how this extraordinary violation of Iranian security even occurred. And of course, it's 24 hours after the inauguration that Haniyeh was attending. It's a challenge to the comparatively moderate new Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian, and it's also clearly a direct challenge to the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei. He's said that Israel will face harsh punishment for attacking what he referred to as a guest in Iran's house. I'm paraphrasing there, but we're into a dark and very hard to fathom chapter here. The southern Beirut attack against Hezbollah left many deeply concerned. We could see a conflagration along the northern Israeli-Lebanese border, but now we have a whole extra thought to have about quite how Iran, Hezbollah's key backer, respond to this extraordinary violation of their sovereignty.
I mean, they'll feel insulted, they'll feel violated. This was sovereign soil.
Quite an embarrassment for the Iranians, as Nick was saying. Their intelligence and their security apparatus, something like this happening on Iranian soil, very embarrassing. And this is why you are bound to see the Iranians responding somehow. But as Nick was saying, how, we don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But it is certainly something that has put the entire region yet again on edge. I mean, this has just been a very, very dangerous 24 hours in the region.
Because there's been two together. If it was just one, it would be less concerning. They came together. Is that how would you describe the...
There are some in the region who are seeing this as provocations and an attempt by the Israelis to push for some...
We covered Trita Parsi's take because he went on CNN to talk about exactly these takes. Good. Kill all of Hamas. Brother, killing all of Hamas is not going to magically make Palestinians feel good about Israel's death and destruction. Okay? This is just violent posturing for no reason. I know a lot of you are coming back after you left because of my initial commentary post October 7 because you were uninitiated. with the subject matter. You didn't know enough about it. Okay. But like, you cannot just kill, unless you kill every single person, you cannot kill an idea. Okay. You just cannot kill people's willingness to survive. You cannot kill people's willingness to not want to live under an apartheid. You just can't eradicate that. The only way to eradicate that is by eradicating the apartheid itself. Okay? That's it. I need you to understand that. I know that American framing on the matter is always like, oh, well, these guys are terrorists. They're barbaric. They're terrorists. They're barbaric. They're just operating on pure vitriol and anti-Semitism. And it's like, it's not. Hamas is a response to 76 years of violent occupation. Okay? That's it. Hamas is a response to Israel increasing the violence in its maintenance of the occupation. What about the charter? What, the 1988 charter or the 2017 charter where they retriangulated and were like, we're actually not anti-Semitic, we're just anti-Zionist? Charter of the top of the hour? Okay, that's a two-parter. You're getting a week off.
Some sort of retaliation, some sort.
Do you think Israel has a right to exist in the region? I do agree that Israel has been an oppressive nation in the region, mainly as a satellite of the West, and they claimed way more than they should have of Palestine since 1947, but I believe the Jewish people deserve a nation of their own. Israel does not have a right to exist in the way that it exists currently. Israel cannot and will not exist as a demographic majority Jewish ethno-state that is currently occupying territory it does not legally have ownership over, where 5 million Palestinians live. Okay? Anyway, that chatter is, the other chatter was right. It is the top of the hour. I'm going to serve you a 3-minute ad break. If you no longer want to see those ads, if you want those ads to be destroyed, then all you need to do is subscribe for $6 or for free with a Twitch Prime. There is no state that deserves to exist, by the way. Okay? Rhodesia did not have a right to exist. And neither does Israel, nor does the United States of America, nor England, nor Germany. Okay? No state has nor Turkey, no state has a right to exist. You have to analyze these situations by looking at the actions and how a state exists. Okay? Wabbit Rabbit, thank you for the 5 gifted subs, allowing 5 people to no longer see the ads at the top of the hour. Anarchism much? No, that's not even what that's not even what I'm saying. I'm not saying like all states are bad or anything like that. Although I do believe that a borderless, classless, moneyless society would be an evolution from what we're experiencing currently, a good, welcomed evolution. But that's not what I'm talking about. Okay? States are an idea that we've cultivated relatively recently, as a matter of fact. It's not like we had the notion of nation states until like the last 100 fucking years. It is a relatively new phenomena, even though obviously with the horse blinders that we have on, we cannot see the world for all of the entire history of mankind. Okay? I don't want to get into like theory or anything like that. But ultimately, the the idea that like every fucking state has to exist, or there has to be a Jewish demographic majority ethno state that has to exist, is ridiculous. Okay? No ethno state has a right to exist as an ethno state. That's number one. And I say this as an American citizen who routinely criticizes America's many efforts in trying to maintain an ethnic majority white population. So if I am to say that it is racist in America, why the fuck would I change that narrative when talking about Israel? What's racist in America on principle is racist in Israel as well. We call Americans that constantly chirp about the Great Replacement and maintaining a white demographic majority racist Nazis. Why the fuck is it different when it's in Israel and all of a sudden the demographic majority is Jewish? It's still racist Nazi shit. That's it. It's the same exact kind of hatred. I agree, but it's harder to counter in a debate since, you know, the Holocaust. No, I mean, I understand that. Darzex is another one of our anti-Zionist Jewish Israeli chatters, if I'm not mistaken. The problem in that equation is that, like, the Palestinians didn't do the Holocaust, right? I mean, you know that. Everybody knows that. It's not like the Palestinians are responsible for the Holocaust. More Palestinians died fighting against Nazi Germany than the one singular Palestinian Grand Mufti that was a British colonial leadership figure anyway. Israeli anti-Zionists exist? Yes. And they're all in here. They're all in this community.
Sort of an escalation happening within 24 hours when you have these two targeted killings taking place in Beirut and in Tehran, especially really in Tehran. Their feeling is that this is pushing the Iranians, their proxies in the region, to some sort of a response. What that is, we're all waiting to see.
And we keep hearing that no one wants a war. Iran doesn't want a war. So how do they respond? By making their point and asserting themselves in this incident, but not escalating to the extent where we're now in a war.
Nobody wants a war, really, because it would be catastrophic for everybody involved. The US doesn't want it in the head of an election, messing up.
On March 22nd, 2004, American-made Israeli helicopter fire 3 missiles at Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, killing him as he left his mosque prayer. On the 23rd, Abed al-Aziz Rantisi is already declared as a replacement. On April 17th, 2 missiles fired at his car killed him too. Khaled Mashal then put out an order to elect a new head in secret, later revealed to be Ismail Haniyeh. This never works, and for a simple reason. As long as there is a supply of apartheid, there will be a demand for resistance. Exactly.
Up their foreign policy, Israel probably is overstretched after its long war in Gaza and is facing in Hezbollah an enemy with a phenomenal rocket arsenal that could do significant damage to their population centres. Lebanon does not want the spectre of Israeli airstrikes over its key cities like Beirut, where Hezbollah has a stronghold. And Iran, look, you know, they try and walk 10 foot tall the whole time. And you heard the fiery rhetoric from the Supreme Leader today, but they're suffering from sanctions. They've just had years of unrest. Now there's a more moderate president in power than Khamenei, frankly, would probably have liked to have seen. So none of them really want it, but none of them can afford at this point to lose face, particularly Iran, after something like this. But it's important to look at the two events of the last 24 hours in sort of slight separation. They're completely connected in what will happen afterwards. But the strike on southern Beirut, you could argue...
By the way, the no appetite for more death and destruction in Israeli society narrative is completely fucking false. It's sad. I'm sure it's hard to feel much empathy for it, considering I actually believe even supposedly left-leaning Israeli Jews can sometimes be afraid of being anywhere that isn't their ethno-state. I have family members who will probably never leave the country. And when I speak about where I want to immigrate to, a lot of times I get told, there's a large Muslim community in X country. Yeah, of course. No, I get it. It's just fear mongering. That fear mongering is set at the heart of the Israeli national mythos. There is obviously valid justifications for being fearful if you're Jewish, considering, I don't know, centuries of fucking Jewish history of oppression, struggle, and being victim to violent pogroms, the Holocaust. The problem is that the Israeli government, since its inception, has nefariously utilized that to create an offensive campaign against people who are helpless, people that were not even remotely related to the violence that Jewish people were subjected to. That fear mongering is, in my uneducated opinion, can sometimes be the first step into fascism. No, it is. And Israel delivers a steady cycle of reinforcement to that fear mongering. Like, Israel is the perfect demonstration of how a society can completely turn fascist. If you want to know what happened in fucking Nazi Germany in the lead up to World War II, look no further than what is going on in Israel and how the average Israeli feels about the current government's actions. It is the exact same one-to-one logic. It's pure fascism. Fascist leadership demands a steady cycle, a steady reinforcement of an enemy that is both weak and strong, an enemy that is in every corner. It is, of course, additionally ironic that for Nazi Germany, it was the Jews, right? And now for Israel, it is the Palestinians, the Arabs, the Muslims.
Was a targeted Israeli response for what happened in the Golan Heights over the weekend, the killing of predominantly teenagers playing football who were Druze. We knew there would be an Israeli response, and they went a little bit...
Like, it's wild. I was listening to Gideon Levy this morning on Democracy Now!, and he was talking about, like, interviewing the Druze population. And yes, there were some, and he said that there were younger Druze that, like, want to become Israelis, whereas, like, the older Druze population... very much so identify as Syrian and Druze and do not want Israeli citizenship whatsoever. But there were still many people in the immediate vicinity in this small town where the bombing occurred that said, fuck you, Israel. We do not want you to go and do more violence in our name. Which is crazy. Like 12 children are fucking blown to bits, and in the immediate aftermath, the Israeli government shows up at your doorstep, and your reaction is like, nah, dog, we don't want this shit. You want to do this for your own self. We don't want this shit at all.
Further, I think, than anybody might have expected by hitting southern Beirut. But after that, you might consider a tit for tat had occurred. This extra assassination of Haniyeh, fully within what Israel has always said it would do. They've always said they go after Hamas leadership. Did they say they'd go into northern Tehran and carry out an attack like this? Well, they've done it before, frankly, with nuclear scientists in 2020. And so a lot of questions as to what Iran is actually going to be able to do next and what's within its sort of pain threshold. And a lot of this will...
I've just been given an evacuation order and told to leave TLV. Apparently, we're getting charter flighted out tonight. I think things are getting a little too hot for the State Department's liking. Tel Aviv? Be safe. What does it mean? What does the chatter mean? The chatter is probably in Israel and is saying that there's an evacuation order in Tel Aviv.
have been factored in.
This comes after the Iranian leadership said that they were going to strike back on Israel in retaliation for the Ismail Haniyeh assassination.
By the Israelis before they even
launched
an attack like this. But there's a key question, and that's really US involvement here. Secretary Blinken has said that they were not aware, they were not involved in this attack. It beggars belief to me, frankly, that there'll be no heads up to the United States of a move like this.
It would be a courtesy, wouldn't it?
I mean, yeah, 5 minutes beforehand. But we simply don't know the full extent, and I'm sure Secretary Blinken is telling the absolute truth here. But if this means that a key move like this was made by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu without telling the United States, then where is that relationship now? What traction does the Biden administration even have after his recent visit to Washington?
And what does it do next? Where does, the role of U.S. diplomacy right now to try and de-escalate this situation, right?
I want to ask you about the peace process, because Qatar made an interesting comment, which was, how can these negotiations continue? Qatar's obviously hosting them if one of the key negotiators has been assassinated, effectively.
I mean, it's a very strong statement coming from
Haniyeh was, right?
Key player in these negotiations, of course, that have been, they've stalled over the past few months, but they have been ongoing and quite delicate talks at this point in time for the release of the hostages for a ceasefire deal in Gaza. And there are critics of the Israeli prime minister who have accused him time and time again of attempts at sabotaging these talks, because they've always felt that it is in his interest to prolong any war. The wars that are going on to stay in office, it's all about his political survival, really, as many have seen it. So you've had this very strong statement coming from the Qataris, the prime minister posting on X saying that the approach of political assassination does prompt the question of how can mediation succeed when one party assassinates the negotiator on the other side. So really big questions about what happens next, but clearly at this point.
This is it. It's like you cannot maintain the facade in the Western world that you cannot maintain the facade in the Western world. I need to clarify, it's not Israel government who's given the evac order. Yeah. You cannot maintain the facade that it's actually Hamas that is fucking up the peace process and the negotiations when Israel killed the principal negotiator. You just can't. And that's why it's yet another miscalculation in terms of Israel trying to do Israel trying to do whatever the fuck it wants to while not really thinking clearly about how this reads to the Western world. Even the American media is not doing that. Flights to Tel Aviv are suspended until Friday.
Point in time, it's very hard to imagine that these talks are going to resume anytime soon.
It's extraordinary to hear Secretary Blinken this morning talking about how the ceasefire is the goal, almost as though this extraordinary move by the Israelis to kill one of the
security establishment planning for a set of possible responses, including attempts to penetrate northern border.
So there is a hold at the very least, right?
I think you can.
Breaking news from Al Jazeera: Israeli Channel 12 is preparing to invade the northern border into Lebanon. There you go. This might be the beginning of the end. We call on the Security Council to issue a resolution obligating Israel to stop its aggression against Gaza. The Egyptian-Jordanian statement. They fucking did this before, and it spectacularly backfired. Yes, U.S. warships are reportedly headed towards Lebanon. Mariv Online says no official confirmation for now. The U.S. Embassy in Beirut urged Americans earlier to prepare for an evacuation plan.
Say a few days people aren't going to be picking up their phones, but particularly one of them. But I mean, we're in a horrific moment here, I think, where the concept of US traction slipping is there as we reach this very dangerous moment of unpredictability.
A lot of people asking a question about the timing. Why now?
Yeah. Why now? Yeah. Well, what's the theory?
It's
what
a question
you mean,
for
why now, so close to the Beirut strike?
No, why now? Why go after Haniyeh right now when there was a feeling that these talks are back on track, when they are getting closer, when Why is it happening? Why did the
they've created
Israelis choose to go after Haniyeh
And
right
it created
now?
the risk of a more hardline leader coming in to replace him, presumably.
Good question. I wonder why. I don't know. Maybe because Israel had no interest in actually fucking negotiating or even like maintaining the safety and security of the hostages. That's a really good question to ask, especially since October 10, Israel's first retaliation, both internally in terms of like maintaining its security, was to kill Israelis and then also immediately start bombing Gaza where the fucking hostages were, which again killed hostages. It feels like I'm going crazy repeating myself over and over again for the past 10 months, but there was never a moment where like it seemed like the Israeli government even made inferences to the safety and security of the hostages. It like their actions showed that reality over and over again. What more should Israel do in order to show the world that they are not interested in the safety and security of their own hostages? It seems like blowing them up into fucking smithereens was not enough of an indication for many.